You don't forget the sound of betrayal. It doesn't come like thunder or sirens, it comes sharp, sudden, like glass shattering inside your chest. That morning had started like any other. I was in the kitchen, swirling a spoon through my coffee, the radio humming some old tune. Sunlight spilled across the counter, catching the steam rising from the mug. I'd just come back from the store with fresh bread and almond milk, Tessa's favorite. It was ordinary, simple, safe. Or so I thought. The front door opened. I figured it was Tessa's sister, Alina, dropping by again like she always did. She had this habit of walking into our home as if she paid rent, tossing her bag on the chair without even looking at me. Usually, I tolerated her presence for my wife's sake. But that morning, her steps carried a different kind of energy. Quick, shaky, almost rehearsed. Behind her came Tessa. My wife's face was pinched tight, eyes darting between me and her sister as if she'd just been told someone had died. I turned, still holding my coffee, ready to greet them. Instead, Alina's voice cracked the air like a whip. Adrian got me pregnant. 7 words. Just like that. Her lip trembled, her eyes glistened with fake tears, and she delivered the line like she'd been practicing in the mirror. My mind refused to register it. I froze, mug in hand, coffee still steaming, and stared at her. Pregnant. With me. It should have been absurd. A sick joke, maybe. But Tessa didn't laugh. She didn't ask me a single question, didn't search my eyes for truth. She simply turned, face twisted in disgust, and without hesitation. Crack. Her palm collided with my cheek so hard my head snapped sideways. The mug slipped from my hand and exploded on the tile floor, shards scattering across the kitchen. My ears rang. My heart pounded. And in that single moment, the woman I'd built a life with, the woman I trusted more than anyone, looked at me like I was a stranger. Before I could even speak, heavy footsteps thundered behind her. Tessa's brothers, Jared and Marco, stormed in with their sleeves rolled up. They didn't ask questions. They didn't want answers. They grabbed me, one on each arm, and dragged me through my own house like I was a criminal. Get your hands off me, I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by Jared's fist slamming into my stomach. Marco shoved me against the fence outside so hard I saw stars. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Someone across the street raised a phone, recording. You sick freak, Jared spat. And Tessa? She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her wedding ring glinting in the sun like it still meant something. She didn't move. She didn't defend me. She didn't even blink. In the span of a single breath, my marriage, my life, was already cracking apart. I stumbled away from the fence, clutching my ribs, the sting of Jared's punch still burning deep in my stomach. My legs felt like rubber, but somehow they carried me down the street. Behind me, Marco muttered something about teaching me a lesson, while Jared spat on the sidewalk as if that sealed my guilt. I kept waiting for Tessa's voice to cut through the chaos. For her to scream at them to stop. For her to say, "This isn't right, let's hear him out." But the only sound I heard was the slam of our front door. My wife, the woman I had promised to protect and love, had turned her back on me without hesitation. The messages started almost immediately. My phone buzzed with calls and texts from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Is it true? How could you do this? You disgust me. Screenshots of social media posts spread like wildfire. Vague accusations, whispered claims, gossip dressed as fact. No names, but enough breadcrumbs that anyone who knew us could put it together. Married man. Sister-in-law. Scandal. Betrayal. By the time I limped back inside to pack a bag, I already knew there was no point trying to explain. No one wanted my truth. They wanted a villain. They wanted me to wear the mask they had chosen for me. I shoved clothes into a duffel, hands trembling so hard I could barely zip it. My eyes landed on the shattered mug still on the kitchen floor. A jagged piece glinted up at me, stained with a drop of my own blood from when I tried to pick it up earlier. I crouched, stared at it for a long moment, then grabbed a bar of soap and scrawled 3 words on the bathroom mirror. You didn't ask. That was all there was to say. No goodbye. No final plea. Just silence. Within an hour, I was gone. I booked the first cheap motel I could find off the highway. The room smelled of bleach and cigarette smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet, wondering how a life so carefully built could collapse in a single morning. The answer came 2 days later. An email appeared in my inbox, notice of administrative leave. My company had seen the rumors. Given the serious allegations circulating online, we believe it is in the company's best interest to initiate a separation process pending formal investigation. I read it 3 times, waiting for the words to change. They didn't. My career, my stability, was gone. And I realized something terrifying. The lie wasn't just tearing apart my marriage. It was erasing me. The email sat open on my laptop screen, its cold words staring back at me like a death sentence. Separation pending investigation. They didn't even bother to call. Just a sterile notice that years of loyalty, late nights, and sacrifices had evaporated in a single rumor. I shut the laptop and pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. A part of me wanted to fight back, to march into the office, demand a meeting, scream my innocence until someone, anyone, believed me. But then another thought hit me like ice water. What if they looked at me the way Tessa had? What if they didn't even let me finish before shutting the door in my face? That fear silenced me. I logged into social media, something I almost never did, and immediately wished I hadn't. A thread was going viral. No names, but the details were enough. Married man cheats with wife's sister. Gets her pregnant. Family in shock. Comments piled beneath it like stones thrown at a corpse. Men like this should rot. Typical predator. Imagine betraying your own family. Every word chipped away at me until I felt hollow. It was like watching my own funeral, except instead of flowers, people were tossing venom. 3 days later, my landlord texted me. Hey man, sorry, just business. But the other tenants are concerned. I'll need you to vacate by the end of the week. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Concerned. That word stung worse than a punch. Not guilty, not dangerous, just contaminated. Like keeping me around might poison the air. I packed my things into boxes that same night, each movement mechanical, numb. By the time I left the key on the counter, I wasn't just homeless. I was nameless. The final straw came the next morning. I walked into the little bakery down the street, the one I'd visited every day for years. Mrs. Ingram, the sweet older woman behind the counter, used to hand me coffee with a smile and say, "Back at it again, huh?" But that day she froze mid-pour. She glanced at me, then at the floor, and muttered, "We're closed today." There were 3 people sitting at tables behind me. One of them whispered, "That's him." I walked out without a word. The bell above the door jingled, cheerful and cruel. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be a ghost. By the 5th day, my phone was useless. Tessa had blocked me. Her mother too. Friends we'd hosted for birthdays, wine nights, and barbecues disappeared from my contacts like I'd never existed. Even distant acquaintances cut me off, as if silence could protect them from being tainted by association. It was surreal. I had built furniture for Tessa's cousin when he moved apartments. I once hauled an entire patio set into her mother's backyard during a heat wave. These people had called me dependable, trustworthy, part of the family. Now, they scrolled past my name like it was radioactive. The hardest blow came from Eloise, my mother-in-law. She had once said I was the most reliable man she knew. Now she was commenting under vague Facebook posts about betrayal by blood, writing, "Some men are wolves in family clothing." Wolves. Reading that broke something final in me. I hadn't argued when Tessa slapped me. I hadn't fought when her brothers dragged me out. I hadn't screamed when strangers online tore me apart. But this. Seeing Eloise, the woman I once thought of as a second mother, painting me as less than human? That cut deeper than fists ever could. I wanted to scream. To defend myself. To plaster the truth everywhere. But there was nothing to post. No screenshots, no secret messages, no proof, because it had never happened. Proof wasn't needed, not when the lie was easier to believe. That night, I lay on the stiff motel bed, staring at the ceiling. A single question gnawed at me, relentless. If someone who loved me could believe the worst of me without hesitation, what was I even worth to anyone? Sleep never came. Instead, I stared at the shadows on the wall, each one whispering the same truth. I was already gone. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I needed to disappear completely. The decision came quietly, almost like it had been waiting for me all along. No dramatic breakdown, no shouting into the void. Just a cold, steady realization. If I stayed, I'd be buried alive under their lies. So I packed light. 2 changes of clothes. My old laptop. A pair of boots. A leather notebook filled with sketches and fragments of thoughts that I couldn't bear to lose. That was it. I sold the rest. Furniture, dishes, even the bed frame I had built with my own hands. Gone. I didn't want reminders. I didn't want ghosts following me into the next life I was about to carve from nothing. At a small travel agency wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat, I stood in front of a bored young woman tapping a crossword puzzle. She didn't look up when the bell above the door jingled. "Where to?" she asked flatly. I hesitated. For the first time in days, I almost laughed. Where to? As if it mattered. As if any place on earth would see me differently. "Anywhere but here," I whispered. She raised an eyebrow, thought I was joking, then clicked her keyboard. By the end of the day, I was seated on a bus heading to a town I couldn't pronounce, my new name scrawled on the fake ID tucked into my wallet. Miles. That was who I would be now. Miles didn't have a wife who slapped him. Miles didn't have in-laws who beat him. Miles didn't carry a lie like a coffin on his back. The ride was long. Cities gave way to empty fields, then forests, then a coastline that stretched forever. I sat near the back, hood pulled low, watching the scenery blur as hours stacked on hours. Funny thing about silence, when it first arrives, it feels like punishment. But as the bus rolled deeper into nowhere, I felt it settle over me like a fog. Heavy, numbing, almost merciful. For the first time in weeks, no one stared. No one whispered. No one called me a monster. And for the first time since that morning in my kitchen, I breathed without flinching. The bus hissed to a stop in a gravel lot that smelled of salt and diesel. "Last stop," the driver muttered, not even glancing at me. That was fine. Anonymity was exactly what I wanted. The town was small, tucked against a restless coastline. Wooden buildings with peeling paint leaned into the wind, their signs faded from years of sea air. A few fishing boats bobbed in the harbor like tired animals tethered to their posts. It wasn't much, but it was far enough. I slung my duffel bag over my shoulder and walked toward the only inn in sight, a squat building with curtains yellowed from time. The woman behind the desk gave me a quick once-over and said, "Cash only." I handed her enough for 2 weeks. No questions asked. That was good. "Know anyone hiring?" I asked, my voice scratchy from disuse. She shrugged. "Try the dock. Old man Ben always needs hands." That's how I met him. A wiry fisherman with skin weathered like leather and a cigarette glued to his lip. He didn't bother with small talk, just tossed me a pair of gloves and pointed at a pile of nets that reeked of salt and rot. "You work, you eat," he said. So I worked. 4 hours, I untangled knots, cut away seaweed, and hauled heavy lines until my back screamed and my palms blistered. But for the first time in weeks, no one judged me. No one whispered. No one cared about who I used to be. That night, I collapsed on the thin mattress in my rented room, every muscle aching. I stared at the cracked ceiling, and for once the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like the start of something new. No headlines. No slaps. No lies. Just fog, salt, sweat, and the fragile outline of a man I might one day become. I kept my head down. Wake up, work at the dock, collapse into bed. That became my rhythm. No internet, no updates, no echoes of the life I had left behind. People in town started noticing me, but in a different way. Not with suspicion, not with pity, just simple acknowledgments. "Morning, Miles. You working the West Dock today? You take coffee with sugar or cream?" It was startling, almost disarming. They didn't want my story. They didn't dig for gossip. They only cared that I showed up, that I pulled my weight. For once, my presence was enough. Some nights, I walked along the shoreline, breathing in the briny air as the waves chewed at the rocks. Other nights, I scribbled in my notebook. Fragments of thoughts, sketches of boats, single words that carried more weight than whole conversations ever could. Running became my release. First just a jog down the empty pier, lungs burning in the cold morning air. Then longer, further, until 5 miles at a time felt like medicine. The pain was honest. The ache in my muscles was something I chose, not something the world forced on me. Months passed. Slowly, I began fixing more than just fishing nets. A shed here. A broken gutter there. A shopkeeper asked if I knew how to repair a sign, and I figured it out. Then another asked if I could help set up their computer system. I borrowed a laptop from the library, watched tutorials, and made it work. Word spread. Miles could fix things. Miles could be trusted. Miles didn't bring drama, only tools and time. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Not because I was screaming to be seen, but because I had chosen the kind of visibility I wanted. Still, at night, when the harbor quieted and the stars reflected on the black water, I thought about her. Tessa. Did she miss me? Did she regret it? Or had she buried me the way the world had, with a single lie? One evening, after a long day hauling nets, I stood on the dock watching the sky melt into shades of orange and purple. The boats rocked gently, their ropes creaking like old bones. It should have been peaceful, but my mind was restless. I thought about Tessa, about the way her eyes had hardened that morning. The slap, the silence, the fact that she hadn't asked a single question. The memory cut like glass, even now. Then I forced the thought away. What did it matter? My old life was dead, and I'd buried the man named Adrian with it. Miles was all that existed now. Miles worked. Miles ran. Miles fixed things. And Miles did not think about women who believed lies over love. But fate doesn't care about the walls you build. It was a Sunday morning when the knock came. Loud. Desperate. The kind of pounding that makes the walls tremble. I froze, hammer still in hand from fixing a loose floorboard. Hardly anyone ever knocked on my door. People in this town respected silence. I opened it slowly. And there she was. Tessa. Her hair was wind-blown, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of the world had been pressing down on her shoulders. For a second, neither of us spoke. My heart thrashed in my chest, part fury, part disbelief. Finally, her voice cracked through the silence. "Adrian, please. I need to talk to you." The sound of my old name, the one I had buried, sliced through me. I should have slammed the door. I should have told her she was too late. But instead, I stood there, frozen, staring at the woman who had once been my whole world, and the one who had destroyed it with a single moment of blind faith. "Tessa," I said finally, my voice flat, almost unrecognizable to my own ears. She flinched at the sound. Her eyes filled with tears as she stepped closer, hands twisting together like a child caught in a lie. "Adrian, I know I don't deserve for you to even look at me, but please, just hear me out." I didn't answer. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting. If she wanted to speak, she could choke on the silence first. Her words tumbled out in fragments, shaky and uneven. "Alina," she admitted it wasn't true. She made it up. Said she was jealous, that she wanted to ruin what we had because she couldn't stand seeing me happy. The confession should have felt like relief. Vindication. Proof that I hadn't lost my mind. But all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. Because none of it changed the truth that mattered most. When it came down to it, she had believed her sister's lie over me. I let out a bitter laugh, low and sharp. "So now I'm supposed to thank you? You destroyed my life, Tess. You let them hit me. You didn't even ask me once." Her tears spilled over, streaking her cheeks. "I know. I was wrong. God, I was so wrong. But I've been looking for you for years. I never stopped. Please, Adrian. I still love you. We can fix this." I stepped back, shaking my head. "Love? You call that love? Love is trust, Tess. And you killed it the moment you raised your hand instead of your voice." Her shoulders crumpled like paper. She reached out, but I didn't move. Her hand hovered in the space between us, trembling, before she pulled it back to her chest. The harbor wind howled around us, and for a long moment, we just stood there. Two strangers wearing the ghosts of who we used to be. The silence stretched so long, I could hear the gulls overhead, their cries sharp against the crash of waves. Tessa's face was pale, streaked with tears, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Please, Adrian. Just give me a chance to make this right." I looked at her, the woman who had once been my safe place, my home. And I saw nothing of that now. Just a stranger who had buried me alive with her trust in someone else's lie. "You want to make it right?" I said, my tone steady, almost calm. "Then live with what you chose. You didn't just lose me that day, Tess. You killed me. The man you loved doesn't exist anymore." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She knew it was true. I stepped back into my small, weathered room and placed my hand on the door. For one fleeting second, I almost faltered. The ghost of our wedding day, of her laughter, of 1,000 quiet mornings together tugged at me. But then I remembered the slap, the shame, the silence of every friend and family member who had left me for dead. And I shut the door. Outside, I heard her break. A muffled sob, footsteps retreating across the wooden planks, and then nothing but the wind. I leaned against the door, heart hammering, breath uneven. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't even feel like revenge. It felt like grief, clean, final, like the last shovel of dirt falling onto a coffin. But underneath that grief, for the first time in years, was something else. Freedom. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need Tessa to believe me anymore. I didn't need anyone. I was Miles now. And Miles had a second chance. I walked back out to the dock that evening, the sky painted in bruised purples and reds. The boat swayed gently, ropes creaking, the ocean stretching endless in every direction. I breathed in the salt air, let it sting my lungs, and whispered to the waves, "They can keep their lies. I'll keep my life." And for the first time since the day it all fell apart, I smiled.